The story we're about to tell you is one of those rare real-life tales that could begin with once upon a time, because it feels like one, until it suddenly doesn't. This is the tragic tale of America's most famous castle, and what went wrong. The story starts with George C. Boldt, who wasn't always the legendary hotel magnate that history remembers. In fact, long before the Waldorf Astoria, before the fame and the wealth, he was just a young immigrant working his way up in America. Somewhere in those early Philadelphia days, as he worked long hours managing a small hotel, George crossed paths with Louise Boldt, never knowing she would become the love that shaped his destiny. She was the hotel's owner's elegant daughter, nothing like the high society image people later attached to her. Their connection was immediate. Louise believed in him before anyone else did, supporting his ambitions and standing beside him as he built an empire. Their love wasn't loud or extravagant. It actually was steady and strong enough to inspire a castle. So at the start of the 20th century, George C. Boldt was a man who had everything. He had wealth, power, elegance, and the kind of success most people only imagine. George was the brilliant hotelier behind the luxurious Waldorf Astoria in New York, respected and admired. But the center of his world was his wife, Louise. Finally, Boldt bought a small island on the river, a quiet piece of land shaped like a heart. Heart Island. The name alone revealed his intentions. He didn't just want to build a home, but a symbol of love. Something that would stand forever and show the world how much he loved her. Many say that George was so in love with Louise that he wanted to build her a life from fairy tales. And for a while, it was a real fairy tale, until it wasn't. So, what caused that sudden change? Before the building started, George gathered hundreds of artisans, stonemasons, carpenters, to be exact, 300 workers in total. All that to build a gargantuan 6-story castle of 120 rooms. In fact, the plans for the castle were astonishing, starting from the grand staircases that curved like something from a dream. Then there are tall, ornate towers rising over the river, not to mention wide balconies built for quiet mornings and summer sunsets. But there were also hidden tunnels connecting parts of the island, and a powerhouse designed to generate enough electricity to light the entire estate. Gardens were Italian style, filled with imported flowers, and even a small playhouse tower meant for their children. Every detail was imagined to reflect love and luxury. Nothing was spared, and nothing was too grand for the castle he was building in her name. But before the castle was finished, and before the dream could turn into reality, tragedy arrived, without warning. Unfortunately, in January of 1904, Louise Boldt fell gravely ill, and her condition worsened quickly. So, at the age of only 41, she died, leaving George alone with their unfinished castle. In fact, when the news reached George, he was shattered, and the man who had everything suddenly had nothing. So, with broken hands and a broken heart, he sent a telegram to Heart Island with just one order: stop all construction immediately. Ironically, that was it. The workers set down their tools and machines fell silent. As a result, half-built rooms stood frozen exactly the way they were that day, and George Boldt never returned to the island, not even once. The castle that was meant to be the ultimate symbol of love became the ultimate symbol of loss. Looks like the dream died the moment Louise did. For decades after that, Boldt Castle sat forgotten and abandoned. Eventually, the castle was exposed to river storms, harsh winters, vandals who broke windows and damaged the walls, and not to mention the slow damage of time itself. Although Boldt never returned to Heart Island after abandoning the castle, he continued spending his summers in the Thousand Islands, especially at the family's estate on Wellesley Island. He remained socially active and fully engaged in his hotel empire, dividing his time between New York and the river region he loved. His life carried on quietly but steadily until December 5, 1916, when he died of a heart attack in Manhattan. He was laid to rest in Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx, leaving behind both a powerful legacy in hospitality and an unfinished monument to his devotion. Later on, visitors of the Boldt Castle sometimes talked about a lonely ghost drifting through the empty halls, its faint steps sounding like a sigh, as if its sadness had sunk deep into the castle itself. Eventually, the castle began to feel less like an abandoned construction site and more like a ghostly shell, trapped in grief and untouched by time's healing. It stayed this way for 73 long years, nothing more than an empty reminder of what it was meant to be. A monument to heartbreak was gently slipping into decay, little by little. But as strange as it sounds, this tragedy didn't stay buried. In fact, in 1977, the Thousand Islands Bridge Authority bought Hart Island for just $1. They promised to restore the castle, not into the luxurious masterpiece Boldt had dreamed of, but into something that honored the story behind it, where everyone can see it. So the work began again, almost a century after it first started. Numerous crews repaired walls, replaced floors, restored staircases, and brought life back into the empty rooms. Slowly, piece by piece, the castle began to breathe again. Of course, visitors were allowed inside, and just like that, boats carried families, tourists, and travelers to the island that once stood silent. At the same time, people walked through the halls where love was supposed to live, imagining what the castle might have looked like if Louise had lived long enough to see it.
The castle was commissioned by George C. Boldt, a wealthy hotel magnate, as a symbol of his love for his wife Louise.
Today, Boldt Castle is one of the most visited places in the Thousand Islands. It's the story of a man who loved his wife so deeply that he imagined a palace for her, only to lose her before it was finished, and watched that dream fall apart the moment she was gone. Because when you walk through the hallways, it feels like the walks carry both sides of that story. In fact, when you step inside, you feel the love that once filled it and the heartbreak that left it unfinished. Still, some visitors say the castle has an eerie feeling, as if the island remembers the moment everything changed. Others say they can almost feel Louise's presence. It's not haunting the place, but lingering softly, like a memory that refuses to fade. Actually, it's haunted emotionally. You don't hear ghosts here. Instead, you feel a heartbreak that never fully healed. Maybe that's what makes Boldt Castle so unforgettable. It's not just stone, wood, and river views, but a love letter built into a place. At the end of this story, we can actually see that even the greatest dreams can crumble in a single moment, but also that love can build kingdoms, and loss can freeze them in time. Out of all this came a lesson we can all learn from. Before you leave this story behind, take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments about it. Is it a place of beauty, of loss, or somehow both at the same time? Also, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories just like this one. Cheers.